before Rabbi Hurwitz shares his thoughts, it would be interesting to go around the table and hear from anyone if anyone has any thoughts on what the number 10 represents. What can you think of when surrounding the number 10? 10 is a minion, very good.
So there are some, like for example, people like to quote the word Israel. So there's two ways of doing gematria. You could count up the numerical value like of past 10, then Chaf is 20 and Lamed is 30. Or you could do Chaf becomes 2 again without the zeros. So if you remove all the zeros and you add up Yisrael, it becomes 10. It's called Mispar Katan.
There's lots of, I love numbers, that's my thing.
So last night I thought it would be a fun exercise if I just type up all the things that come to mind and from a quick Google search. I'm sure there's a lot more, but I just want to see how many of them we get. So we've got the 10 commandments, we've got Minyan. Anything else? The 10 tribes of Avraham Avinu, 10 generations from Noach to Adam, from Adam to Noach and Noach to Abraham. 10 plagues, Eser Makot, yes. So I thought of dividing it into different classes of the 10s. This is really a continuation of last week, where last week I spoke about medieval philosophy and some of the weirder thoughts they had, and they had a very interesting perspective on the number 10. And then I'll also show how today in Hasidut and Kabbalah we still have similar ideas. I was going to divide it into classes of numbers which are 10, like the 10 commandments, or the 10 ma'amarot with which the world was created. So the classes of 10 objects. Then you have 10 accumulative 10, like you're counting 10 generations. So you've got the counting.
So you think it's not true until more modern philosophy comes along.
And then we'll find that actually
Yes,
there actually is some planet where there's a king sitting on a throne, God sitting on a throne, right? For example, for the things accumulative, which are the things which are 10, Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 Ma'amarot the world was created in, you've got the Nisyonot of Avraham Avinu, you've got the Makot we've mentioned, then you've got a whole list of 10 miracles in the Beit HaMikdash. The Pirkei Avot lists a whole bunch of miracles with 10, for the Egyptians in the sea, in Egypt, the 10 miracles. You also have the 10 Harugei Malchut, who are the Romans, there were 10 Tanaim, 10 rabbis from the Mishnah who they tortured, and this is corresponding with the sale of Yosef, where there were 10 brothers. There were 9, so who's the 10th one? That's God. So 10 of them together makes half the 10. Then you have the cumulative, like the 10 generations, or the Torah counts 10 shekel for each kaf. So that's also, the Torah points out it was 10. And then you have where 10 becomes a complete number. This is not necessarily a Jewish concept, but we see in the Pirkei Avot, for example, that every decade becomes important. So you count 10 years, and then you have, for example, 40 is Binah, 80 is Gvura, right? You have every 10 years in a person's life represents something. So 10 becomes a complete number. Rashi Tevot, you have past Yud becomes Chaf, Lamed, 20, 30. So each letter jumps by 10. So 10 represents a complete number. Now this is where I think it gets interesting, because in mathematics we see this. How do we see this in mathematics? So we count by sums of 10, right? So 10, 20. Now, I saw some rabbi write that, isn't it interesting that we count by numbers of 10s? Because every culture you go to, everyone counts by numbers of 10. Why doesn't some culture count by number of 11? Clearly, God thought there's something objectively special about the number 10, because he created the world with 10 numbers, and that's why all the cultures. Now, I mean, I would respond and say, well, we've got 10 fingers. So if people are counting, could it be maybe that's why everyone counts by sums of 10s? I don't know. I was just going to mention that. Sense. I don't know if it's because God instilled it in people to count by number 10s. But in any case, philosophers decided that there must be something objective about the number 10. There must be something in the world which is natural. And they cited a whole bunch of examples where we see the number 10 is objective. One of them was maths. Now, if I'm not mistaken, there are certain numbers that would be better to count with. Like, I'll give an example. Theoretically, suppose we counted by sums of 18. Would that be better than counting by 10s? Well, if you cut 10 in half, that's 5. 5 is an inconvenient number to cut in half because you have 2.5. You don't have a complete number. If you count by sums of 18, right, or 16, let's go with 16, because 18 becomes 9, which is also a problem. But if you count by sums of 16, it becomes an 8, becomes a 4, becomes a 2, becomes a 1. Wouldn't 18 be a better number to count by than 10s? I guess it's harder for us to think that way because we're already programmed to think sums of 10. There are many numbers. I believe 12 might also be a better number. The fact that we count by 10 is very arbitrary. Now, the response would be, again, you've got 10 fingers, so it's easier to count by 10 because you could just, like kids, how they count and just pull down their fingers. So we just happened to come by. But the philosophers did not think of this, and they thought there's something objective about the number 10, which is why in mathematics, past 10 becomes 20 and 30, not realizing it's completely arbitrary, and you could just count differently. Now, in religion also we see that 10 represents holiness. Anyone can think of why Kodesh, Kedusha, is represented with the number 10? The first letter of God's name, that's a good point. The 10 Sefirot, okay, but that's already in Hasidut. In traditional Judaism, the number 10 could be represented, first of all, in the concept of whenever 10 people are present, then Kedusha is that the Shekhinah is with them, right? So why is this relevant? If you want to say a Kaddish, you need 10 Jewish men, right? So you need a minyan for 10. If it says V'nikdashti, God becomes sanctified in the presence of 10. So the number 10 represents Kedusha in the sense that God is sanctified, Nikdashti, Kodesh, Kedusha, amongst the presence of 10. Another 10 is 10%, right? You've got 10 animals, you have to donate one of them, 10%. What do? You start counting the animals, and the 10th animal that comes, Ha'asiri, Yiyeh Kodesh. The Torah says the 10th one shall be holy. So again, this is not a category of 10 objects, but it still is the number 10 representing holiness. And I think there are two more, is Yom Kippur. What day of the month is Yom Kippur on? 10. And furthermore, the Talmud says that there are 10 days a year which are God is close to us, representing holiness. Between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the Aseret Yemei Teshuvah. 10 days, the first 10 days of Elul are the 10 days of holiness. And there's one more, but I don't think anyone's here going to get this one, because this one's, I personally wouldn't have got it if I didn't see this, was in Rosh Hashanah on Musaf we pray, and we pray three different things. We pray Malchuyot for the kingship of God, for the memory, Zichronot, memory of, for example, the Akedah, the sacrifice of Isaac, and we do Shofrot for the shofar. And each one has 10 Pesukim. Each one has 10 Pesukim. And the Talmud actually says that if you say 7 out of the 10, it's enough, because it corresponds to the spheres, to the 7, 10, Rekim. Talmud says 7, so 7 is enough out of 10. So we see the number 10 already as far as holiness is concerned, we see the idea of 10. So the philosophers, it didn't take them a long jump to say, well, there's something objectively holy about 10. God is present amongst 10. 10 days of Yom Kippur between Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur itself, Maaser, 10th shall be holy, right? In the Beit HaMikdash, we mentioned that you need 10th for the spoons. Birkei Avot has a whole list of 10s, right? The Nisyonot, the world was created by 10, right? So it's something objective. So that's obviously why the world functions by 10s. So you've got the 10 in mathematics, they thought of it as objective. Now, where this becomes interesting is when we contrast this with Aristotelian philosophy, right? Because the Jewish philosophers are very into Aristotelian philosophy. So first of all, you've got I don't know if this is necessarily Aristotelian as much as just traditional classical philosophy. Every object is made up of 10 dimensions, let's say, right? So it's got the depth of the object, the width of the object, and the length of the object, right? So that's 3. Now, this is just the make-up of the object in the sense you've got a cup, so the cup is tall, it's wide, and it's deep. The depth is the inner space of it. This already is kind of arbitrary, not objective, in the sense that the depth doesn't really, if you've got length and width, so you're just adding length and width to another direction, and you've got a 3D length and width. It doesn't necessarily have to be considered 3. It could be 2 or 4. Then you've got another 3. What is another 3? Each one of these is made up of a beginning, an end, and a middle. And then the entire object in completion is the etzem of the object, the essence of the object is the object, and then it's made up of 9 components, right? Now, the fact that we're counting the essence there as another one is also kind of arbitrary. You could have just counted it as 9, or even 11, or 8, right? So again, I don't see this as a proof there's something objective about the number 10. It's very random that they decided to add the essence into the 10. It's very random that the depth of the object doesn't count as 2 or as none. I want to hear the counter response if you don't agree with why I guess so. And you're making another good point, which is what about 2D objects? Those don't have these 10, right? So it's not really objective about anything objective about number 10. Another philosophical proof for the objectivity of number 10, and this one I think is the funniest one. It's Aristotle's 10 categories. Has anyone over here heard about Aristotle's 10 categories? No. Okay, Aristotle's 10 categories is also very similar in line to this one, in the sense that you've got 1, which is the essence, and then 9 which surround it. Whenever you speak in any language, so it's not just in English, which we speak, or Hebrew, every language is only 10 ways to describe something. So there must be something objective about it, because in any language ever, there's only 10 ways to relate.
To describe something.
To relate or describe something in speech. Yeah. So first thing is the object itself at question, right? So that's the etzem, the essence of the object. Then there's, in Hebrew, what we say, kamut and eichut, right? So if let's say I say there are 10 apples. When I'm saying the number 10, that is not something I'm describing the actual object by. Rather, it's a descriptive term of the object as to how many objects it is, or, right? So that's the kamut, that's the, kamut, I'll just say the Hebrew word.
Quantity.
The quantity of the object. Then there's eichut, which is quality, right? So if I'm saying there are 10 objects, right? But I'm not saying what color the object is or what shape the object is. So if I'm giving non-essential descriptions to the object, that would be the quality of the object. So I'm saying there are 10 red apples. So red is the quality of the object. 10 is the quantity of the object. And apples is the object I'm actually discussing, right? So this is the 3. Then I can describe an object in relation to another object. So I can say the object is that the 10 red apples are next to the yellow oranges, or the 5 yellow oranges. The word next to is not the object itself, or if I say bigger or smaller, right? These are not, it's describing the object I'm discussing in relation to something else, right? So you've got the object itself, you've got how many it is, about the object, you've got its relation to something else. Then I can describe an object by its position. I can describe an object by where it is, right? So I've got, it's going to get complicated. I've got 10 red apples next to the 5 yellow oranges, which is, in the Shul cafeteria, right? Now the Shul cafeteria is not the object I'm discussing. What I'm discussing here is the apple. I'm just locating it somewhere, right? And then I can go further. I saw the 10 red apples next to the 5 yellow oranges in the Shul cafeteria, right? And I could say at 5 p.m. or yesterday at 5 p.m. When I'm saying yesterday at 5 p.m., that is giving a description not of the location of the object, but of when I saw it. So that is the timing of an activity, as well as seeing it, which is another new category, right? Well, so as of now, we've got the object itself, right, which is the apples or oranges I'm discussing.
What is
right?
relative to? Which is
So,
the other one?
then there's the quantity, which is 10 and 5.
Yeah.
Then there's the quality, which is yellow and red, right? Then I've got in relation to something else, which is that it's next to the yellow oranges, right? Or it's in the Shul cafeteria. Then the location would be the Shul cafeteria, right? Well, we're going to get soon to the fact that I saw it, but let's just skip that for a second. And then there's when I saw it, which is yesterday at 5 p.m., right? So that's 6. There's 4 more. There's the position of the object, right? Such as the objects were laying on the table. And then there's the this is where it gets interesting, the psychological position of something, such as being worn.
Being
Worn.
Being worn.
Or worn
or used or,
with an N.
Oh,
Worn.
worn, W-O-R-N,
Or
yeah,
for
yeah.
example, right, something is naked.
or brand new, fresh.
Fresh is a good example, yes. Fresh is not the physical position of the object, it's the psychological position of the object. And then there's when I said I saw, right? Any action, there's the actor and the actee. I don't know if actee is a real English word, I just made it up. There's the one who kicks someone, there's one who throws a ball, and there's the ball which is being thrown, right? So these are 10 different classes of speech. Now, do you think it's a coincidence that there are exactly 10 ways of describing an object? Now, I would question this by saying, again, the same thing. The fact that you counted 10 is kind of arbitrary. Why is actor and actee separate? Why is time and space separate? Why is psychological and physical description separate? Why can't it be, I don't know, and why are we counting the essence in, the object discussed? Why is there 10? Why can't you just count 9 and say that actor and actee is the same? Why are we deciding to arbitrarily separate the two? Or why is the physical and psychological position of something considered 2? Why can't you say being worn and laying, they're both positions, so it's only 9 counts. We've arbitrarily decided to separate them and now say there are 10 categories of speech and therefore there must be something objective by the number 10. Not necessarily. Now Aristotelian philosophers will argue with me on this and they will explain that no, there is, you can't separate them, they have to be in, and they'll explain why it must be that these are separate and what, right? In any case, I'm not convinced by this either. Now, philosophers also accepted evidence from astronomy, things we don't accept today as a fact. Now, we spoke last week about the 10 spheres in medieval, astronomy, which is before Aristotelian philosophy of the Rambam's times. They believed in 10 spheres to be the, after 7 planets, the zodiacs and the stars, and then you had the god sitting on the throne. But as time went on, the Muslim philosophers had a more rational sphere system past this. They believed, you have the very outside layer, which is the wisdom, the active intellect, everything comes from. Beneath that, you have the Galgal HaMakif, the outside sphere that surrounds everything. Then you've got the stars, and you go on to the 7 planets. But interestingly, there's another astronomical, is that the word astronomical?
Something to do with space.
There's another cosmological argument you could make for number 10. There are 10 sizes of planets. Yeah, there are 10 planet sizes. When you evaluate them by the size of the Earth, I believe the Earth is the 7th in sizes. So if you measure certain planets by sizes, you'll find, now again, why is this not a good proof? Either of these, it's scientifically incorrect. They weren't aware of all the planets. They believed in a geocentric universe. So it might sound convincing if you're misinformed. Today we know that there are more than 7 planets out there. Right? We know that they were misinformed on a lot of the science back then. So this is not a proof of anything essentially important about the number 10. Be that as it may, Rabbi Antoli in his Ma'amar on Shavuot, Parashat Yitro, not Ma'amar Shavuot, Parashat Yitro, he explains the importance of the number 10 in the Aseret HaMidibrot. And he decided that just like we've just discussed the continuum of 10, you've got the number 1, which is the essence. That's like, right, the thing you're discussing as the object, or in the 10 ways of making up an object, you've got the thing itself, then you've got the width, the depth, right? With the 10 days, also with holiness, 10 days of holiness, you've got Yom Kippur, the 10th, right? You've always got one, which is the essence, the thing itself, and then the 10 descriptives of it. You've got the 10 creations of the world was created with 10. The first one was Bereshit bara Elokim. Bereshit nami ma'amar, who the Talmud says, right? Creating the intellect with which the world was created, which we discussed last week. The world was created with the intellect, which then shaped the world and formed the world and everything. That first creation is the essence of everything that makes up the world. That's the DNA of the world. Everything beyond that is just exterior, right? So he said the same applies to Aseret HaDibrot. Rabbi Antoli argued. You've got the first one, I am your God. The rest are all just trying to back up that one. That is the essence of Judaism, that first Dibra. And the whole Torah is represented in the Aseret HaDibrot. But that first one, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, is the point of everything. And then you go on with the rest. And he said that the way the number 10 works always is you've got the first one, then you've got the 2 which are built off this, like you've got the 10th sphere, which is the intellect, and you've got the 3 spheres, which is the Galgal HaMakif, which is the, firmament, I believe is the word, right? That sphere with, and then you've got beneath that, the wisdom within the stars and things like that. And then you've got the 7 planets. So the same applies to Aseret HaDibrot. You first got Anochi, and then 2 more of Lo Yelecha and Lo Tisa, right, which are all related to God. And then comes Shabbat. Shabbat is preceded with 7. Besides the 7 commandments it's preceded with, Shabbat is the 7th day of the week. So the number 7 is represented in Shabbat. So Rabbi Antoli saw the 10 phenomenon with which the world was created, with which mathematics works, where with mathematics you've got the 1, and then it becomes the essence because then you've got 20s and 30s and 40s. The same applies to the Aseret HaDibrot and to the Asar Mamarot, and this is a intrinsic part of the world. Now, what I always find interesting is seeing how this evolves into our contemporary thoughts and philosophy. We no longer believe in a lot of this, but the number 10 is still an important number in Judaism. So, for example, the Maharal of Prague has an interesting perspective on why the number 10 is so important. The Rebbe also has a sikha where he explains the importance of a number 10. And overall, the number 10 is still a very important number, whether or not the astronomy is true. And in Kabbalah and Chassidut, we have the 10 Kochot HaNefesh, the 10 Sefirot, right? And very interestingly, you've got the same dichotomy, where you've got the very first one, which is Chokhmah. Chokhmah in Kabbalah or Chassidut is depends on how let's just go with the traditional, the way today it's seen, where Chokhmah is the first and you've got Bina and Da'at. That's how Chabad likes to think of it. Chokhmah, Bina, Da'at are all in the intellect. So you've got the first 3. And Chokhmah is the essence of all of them. It's just not worked properly. It's just the idea of the way it is. And then you've got the 4th one, which represents all 7 midot. So just like you've got the seventh, the first three, which is about God, and then you've got seven. You've got Chokhmah Bina Da'at. So I see this. I personally see this, and I'm open to people disagreeing with me. But I see the same philosophical dichotomy where you've got the first three, and you've got the first, which is the essence of all 10, and then you've got three, and then you've got seven. You've got the same thing with Chassidut in the 10 Sefirot. In Kabbalah, Chassidut, there are two ways to evaluate the 10 Sefirot. I'm going to go with the standard Chabad way of analyzing it, where you've got an idea. So let's say I decide to have a company idea. I don't know all the details. I don't know what it's going to look like, but there's a certain, in the back of my mind, there's an idea which is just there as a spark, as an idea. Now, that idea is the Chokhmah. Anything that's ever developed, it always exists in some spiritual, like we spoke about this last week, right? It must exist beforehand. Now, if you develop this idea and you think about it more, which is that concept of Bina, a more thought through version of that idea, you'll have more clarity on the details, which would then lead someone to emotions. The clarity of a spiritual concept, which could lead someone to have an emotion, would be the concept of Da'at. Da'at bridges the concept to the emotion. And then you've got the seven emotional thing, which is, seven emotions of how the intellect evolves into finally passing it on to the next, or to, it's a development of an idea, the 10 Sefirot. So you've got, for example, idea of chesed, which is the idea of giving. And then gvura, of holding it back. And then you've got the compromise, tiferet, which leads on to the fourth or the last four, which is already the emotion weights in action. So you've got the chesed and gvura version within the action, which is the conquering, and then the admission, right? The two opposites. And then that also results in Yesod, which is the combination of the two, which then results in Malchut, which is already the last of this, and it's a bridge to the next intellect, to the next world. Yeah, so over here also you've got the first one, which is the intellect, the concept, the way it is, and the next, two, which is the first three, which is the intellect. And so I think that's an interesting thing to see in Kabbalah and Chassidut, how you've got the same dichotomy of the 10.